This program is brought to you by Medical City, the Neely School of Business at TCU, and Community Trust Bank. Welcome to Platforms, the life-lifting news program for women. Now, here's your host, Siobhan Palmer.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Platforms, the life-lifting news program for women. Continuing our conversation today, talking about Grace After Fire, a Texas-based nonprofit that helps women veterans and their families. My next guest is the executive director of Grace After Fire. Kim Olson was part of the first generation of female military pilots. After 25 years of service, becoming a command pilot with over 37 hours of flying time in 6 different aircraft, Kim commanded a KC-135 air refueling squadron and served in Iraq, retiring as a colonel. Colonel Olson, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Siobhan. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're delighted. This is such an exciting organization, and it seems like the need is so great now. But before we go into the specifics as your role as executive director, give our audience a little bit more background about your military career. I'm always fascinated. What motivated you to go into the military and specifically the Air Force?
Well, I always blame my decision on going into the military on my mother. She was a teacher by training, was in the education field, and when I graduated from college, I had a teaching degree. And it was late 70s, early 80s, and I had a choice to go teach in the classroom or go into the military. And of course, at that time, all those career fields were opening for women.
Right.
So when I informed her that I thought I'd follow in her footsteps, she thumped me on the head and promptly told me to try another path. She said, give it 4 years and we'll see how it goes. And of course, 25 years later, I finally retired, but it was quite an adventure.
Well, my husband's a pilot, and he says flying is a disease, so I assume that you you were addicted with that same disease. Is that correct?
It was kind of my first love. Flying is your first love. It's really.
Right. And you, again, we're going to be focusing on Grace, but just briefly, you wrote a very fascinating book about your experiences over in Iraq, and share with our audience the name of that book.
Well, the book is called Iraq and Back, The War to Win the Peace, and so it entails sort of my flying career, what it took to progress through the Air Force in an all-male environment, and then it intertwines the story of trying to rebuild Iraq in 2003 after the combat operations stopped. Right. And so it sort of is it's a good journey for those that want to know about the military and those that want to know what it's like to rebuild a country.
Beautiful. Well, let's talk about how you got involved with Grace After Fire. You know, Stephanie obviously is a fireball, so how did you two ladies meet, and how did you end up being the executive director?
Well, as you can see, Stephanie is quite an impassioned woman, and she's a hard one to say no to. So, and she really laid out for me what the issues were with our women vets, and in a way I'm kind of ashamed that we women vets didn't know it ourselves, and we didn't have what it took to put an organization together like that. So thank goodness for women like Stephanie Malls. And we met through a network of women. It's really fascinating that there were women out there that put us together, because that's how fate is, I think, sometimes. And we were in the same room, and she looked at me and said, I need your help. And after I heard her, I said, you got it. Whatever it is you need me to do, I'll do. And so we came to a meeting of the minds. As she said, she has a great board, and so they allow me to run this phenomenal organization.
Well, being a vet yourself, I mean, it just gives more credence to the mission. Did you find that you experienced, or you could at least empathize with some of the struggles that these women vets were having coming back from combat?
Oh yeah, read the book.
Yeah,
very much so. And you know, I wasn't a 19-year-old when I got back from Iraq. I was very experienced in my job, and I struggled a bit reintegrating back into civilian life, as we call it. So,
well, give us some examples. What were some of the early struggles you experienced?
Well, I think it's very common knowledge that anyone that goes to war is not the same person that comes back from war, that there is a piece of you that stays behind, and the problem is the war zone becomes what's normal and the civilian world is abnormal. So it's a period of time for you to readjust back into civilian life. Reintegration back into the family, reintegration back into things that kept you alive overseas are not things that you want to do here in the stateside, like avoiding trash along the side of the road, you know, things like that. So when I came back into the United States and eventually retired, there was a transition period from all my adventures in Iraq, as we call it. So I can certainly empathize with the young folks that have had multiple tours. And what's interesting, Siobhan, is we are laying the war effort on a very small portion of our population. Never before in our nation have we had so few people carrying out the mission of keeping this country safe. It falls basically now on 1% of the shoulders of our population. 1%. So that's why you see multiple tours, and you can do, even Vietnam didn't do that. 1 and 2 tours in Vietnam. Here we have adults who go 3, 4, and 5 tours, and it's just very, very difficult on them and on their families.
Well, you know, in the previous segment, Stephanie was saying she felt compelled to start this organization because the female vets seem to have unique problems dealing with the after effects of their exposure than vice maybe their male counterparts. So could you explain why that is? It can be a gender issue sometimes in terms of...
Well, it's kind of a twofold issue. One is the bureaucracy, if you will, that's set up to take care of the vet was built around a model of a male and an older male. So the average veteran that the VA sees is about 60 to 61 years old. So his issues and his health concerns are way different than the female vet, her average age is about 47. So the 47-year-old female vet has children. She probably works. She doesn't have, you know, a stay-home wife like our 60-year-old counterpart male vet. And then, of course, obviously, by different gender, we have different issues that we need taken care of in the medical facilities that we have.
I was horrified reading a little bit about the statistics about the high incidence of rape in the military. Why is this going on?
Well, the survey calls for, that the VA did was around military sexual trauma. So that is what it is. And unfortunately, what the vets are reporting is 1 in every 5, which is a pretty staggering statistic. The combat zone is a high intense environment. People may or may not live the next day. It's not excuses, these are facts. Right. There is a tremendous amount of tension and anger in that field. And so, again, it doesn't justify it, but one thing that it could be is that we're now allowing women to report it. So what you're seeing is just the statistics coming forward. But once it's reported, we got to do something about it.
Exactly.
You know? And so we've got to prevent it on the front end, and we got to care for them when it happens on the back end. And that's where Grace falls in. No matter what happens to you in the combat zone, we're here for you. And we can help you transition back, or we can help you heal from whatever wound occurred in the combat zone. And I think it's just vital to this nation, not only to help the male vets reintegrate, but especially for the female, because female veterans tend to be sort of the nucleus of the family. And if you lose the woman in the family, you lose the family. 40% of our vets have children, female vets have children. 40% of our female vets are married to other male vets. So not only are they dealing with their own issues, but they're dealing with their husband's issues also. So she really, a lot of things, we have a bad habit, women. We take care of everybody else and then ourselves last. And what I would say to our female vets out there is get selfish. Get selfish and take care of yourself first, because you are going to be a much better mother, you're going to be a much better daughter, and you're going to be a much better mate in your household if you will care for yourself first.
Beautiful. Kim, hold that thought. I want to go to break, but when we come back, ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue our conversation with Kim Olson, the Executive Director of Grace After Fire. This is Siobhan Palmer with Platforms, the life-lifting news program for women.